Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our entitled Parents. In today's episode, parents threw me out as a child and then expected everything from me when my grandparents died. What do I do about my MIL? My dad gets mad at a pregnant lady and her setup/takedown crew. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Parents threw me out as a child and then expected everything from me when my grandparents died. My friend who helped me set up this account repeatedly asked me to post this story, and now says it's too good not to place here. So fine, I'll do this one more time. As others may know, I mentioned in my HOA post about how my parents hated me and only loved my sister. This is the story of that. I was born when my mother and father were only 17. It forced both of my parents to drop out of high school and each get a GED so they could find work right away. My father especially was not happy about this because he had dreams of playing football in college, and instead he had to work at a gas station. He said to my face many times that I ruined his dream. My mother hardly raised me at all as she had to work too. They had a cranky old lady next door watch me most of the time. She wasn't so bad. She gave me more attention than my parents did. My father eventually managed to land a better job as a manager due to his experience running the gas station. It was right after that my mom got pregnant with my sister. I was 6 when she was born. I wasn't exactly shown much love before that. But once my sister came along, it was made pretty obvious to even my 6-year-old self that I was unwanted. The only ones who seemed to care were my paternal grandparents and somewhat my babysitter. And they were more like my parents because they treated me the way a little kid needed to be loved. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. And as my sister got older, it went from me sharing a bedroom with her to me kicked out of the room entirely. I slept on the couch for 2 years. And I barely had anything to my name other than clothes, school supplies, and an old Game Boy. When I was 10, my parents decided they were gonna move away. But this move did not include me. I ended up actually being fine with this, as my grandparents had agreed to take me in. My life was instantly better. I got my own room again, and my grandparents gifted me a brand new N64 in 1996. That Christmas I got a Game Boy Pocket too. And there were a couple of other kids my age in the neighborhood I got to hang out with. We rode bikes, played video games, shot cans with pellet guns, built forts, and got dirty playing in the creek. You know, stuff a normal kid would enjoy. I was finally happy. As time went on, I grew up and eventually moved out. But later moved back in to help my grandparents' house as they were getting old and living off their retirement savings. So some rent money from me went a long way in paying the bills. My grandpa was the kind of person who'd wanted to build a bomb shelter during the Cold War. But never got around to it. He wanted to volunteer for the military in the 60s, but was turned down due to a medical condition and the fact his eyesight was not great. So he focused on saving whatever he thought he needed. He told me many times it was better to have something and not need it, than need it and not have it. Our area suffered from numerous power outages in winter due to heavy winds and storms. So having gasoline and propane for heaters and generators was a must. All these saving habits became my own as time went on. Because it was better to need this stuff rarely than not have it at all. Of course there was the HOA bothering us. But that's its own other story. The problem is, about 5 years back my grandma died suddenly. And my grandpa was heartbroken. He also went about 1.5 years later. Pretty much everything they owned was willed to me. Their savings, their house, their vehicles, their stuff, everything. The house was long paid off, and Grandpa knew how to keep up with its maintenance. In fact, after Grandma died he kind of doubled down on renovating the place. He had the roof redone, the house was repainted by us inside and out, and we fixed a lot of little things. Grandpa's neighbor George even came by to help redo the plumbing. Ironically, the HOA was rather happy with these changes, because the house didn't look rundown anymore. One morning I was fixing breakfast and my grandpa never came downstairs. You couldn't keep the man from his bacon. So I went to check on him. And he wasn't moving. I called 911 and paramedics came. Only to tell me he'd passed in his sleep. My parents made Grandpa's funeral a shit show. They didn't bother to show up for Grandma's. They were too busy. And at Grandpa's funeral they didn't seem to grieve at all. My sister also showed up wearing a brightly colored designer dress, which I wasn't happy about as it was a church clothes only function. I noticed my parents repeatedly whispering to each other and glaring at me whenever I looked at them. Come to find out at the will reading that my parents knew that they'd been disinherited long ago for their treatment of me. And they thought it extremely unfair I got everything. They threatened to sue me to contest the will. And I got repeated calls and messages from my father, mother and sister telling me I needed to do the right thing and give my father what was supposed to be his. I told them all to flake off in far more unsavory words. My parents ended up taking me to court to challenge the will. But the judge ruled in my favor after seeing the will and hearing us both out. So it wasn't a long drawn-out legal battle. The judge even looked at my parents with absolute disgust after seeing the will and hearing about their mistreatment of me in my childhood. He called my father a terrible parent, and that my grandparents were right to disown him. My father just hung his head in silence, but he made sure to stop me outside the courtroom and tell me I was always the biggest mistake of his life. And that if he could go back in time, he'd make sure I never existed. He should have been a football star. And instead he has to wear a name tag for a 9 to 5. I told him that mistake or not, Grandma and Grandpa could see what kind of nasty person he was. I didn't ask to be born. And the only real love I ever got was from my grandparents. And he was no father of mine anymore. I got a few more threatening and harassing phone calls, as well as some letters from my parents. All demanding money among other things. But over time they just stopped because I completely stonewalled them. Never responded to the emails or letters, and I stayed silent during the phone calls. A few times I just left the phone sitting on the counter with them ranting till they realized I wasn't listening. Aside from not getting the house or money, my parents seemed particularly irked they could not even get a rise out of me. But I was prepared to go to war against them. And they knew it. So in the end they just left me alone. From what I know looking at Facebook the past decade, my sister tried to get into modeling, got married, had 2 kids, got divorced, and is currently unhappily working a job she feels is beneath her. My mother currently works retail, and is also vocal about her disdain of it. Like my father, she peaked in high school. She was a cheerleader back then, and even had her old uniform framed on the wall. My father has pretty much had the same job for 25 years. He must be good at it if he's still doing it. As for me, well, I'm in my late 30s now. And I live pretty much debt-free in a nice neighborhood. I haven't really had a girlfriend since high school. And I've had little motivation to ever have another relationship. But loneliness gets to everyone. So maybe I'll try to find someone soon. Not many are in the financial position I'm in at my age. Single, paid-off house, 2 vehicles, and a decent amount in the bank. I guess I could aim to be a stepfather. That might be more my speed. I recall that post. I have no idea why they would remove it. As I said in your other post, just keep living your life, kiddo. Your grandparents knew what they were doing and why. Much love. Granny. Kinda makes me wonder what if one of them moderators could be someone who knows the story and don't want it to be known. Your grandparents raised a wonderful person. I hope you find love and family and happiness. You talk about being a stepfather, have you ever considered fostering? As you said, your parents peaked in high school. Yet instead of making something of themselves, they chose to scapegoat you for their failures. I'm glad that you ultimately triumphed over these toxic people. Go out and live your life while your parents wallow in the witch's brew of their miserable lives. Your grandparents were amazing people and I'm glad you had them in your life. You're not too old to find you a soul and think about children someday if that's what you want out of life. I can see how your parents' treatment of you damaged your emotions, but that doesn't mean they have to win in that aspect either. Already lost their inheritance, let them lose it, you being happy with a spouse and children if that's what you want our life. Best wishes. What do I do about my MIL? Last year, I had my MIL and her mom and 2 daughters come live with me, my fiancé, and 3 kids. It's been really hectic from the beginning. Help with childcare for about a couple hours a day from her daughters, no help with housework or other things. She pays $300 a month from her mom's SSI for rent, but all our bills with Wi-Fi accumulates more than $600, and our rent is $2,850. She was supposed to help with food stamps in the beginning, never did. It was only supposed to be a couple months, but here we are a year later. We are lying on our lease that we have a whole extra family here, and my fiancé has seemed to care less and less about her being here. I'm having to work my butt off overtime to get the funds for our place. My fiancé is working his butt off trying to keep the place. I get my kids up for school every day. I get them breakfast, take them to school, pick them up and go to work when my fiancé gets home. She has her daughters watch my 2-year-old daughter a couple hours a day in between my son's baseball and me getting home. Mael hadn't worked in about 7 years and is planning on not working in the future and wants to be on a program that pays her rent so she can stay home with her girls while they live off her mom's SSI. Not sure what to do in this situation since I'm stressing 24/7 busting balls while she's home chilling. My fiancé wanted her out before but doesn't seem to care as much since she says she'd have to move in with her uncle and I guess it's not the best place? We're about to not have a place since we are drowning. Trying to keep our head over water while all this weight on our feet. Am I wrong for feeling the way I do? What would you guys do in my situation? I have severe depression, anxiety, and PTSD and I feel like this has brought me to the lowest point I could feel. I hate this. I would also like to add she has gotten in the middle of me and my fiancé's arguments and would consistently take his side, even when he's very clearly wrong. He has anger issues and lashes out sometimes. I'm 27 BTW. If your husband doesn't care about his own family well-being, neither should you. Give them an ultimatum and let them know they need to leave. If the mom really wants to get paid, she can apply for Medicaid waiver for her mom so SHE can get paid to take care of her mom. The daughters can too. No sense of everyone bombing. They didn't live up to their end of the bargain. Also, it's long overdue for them to leave. You have a family and they should come first. Thank you. He had told me he told her she needed to go because of our lease and she said she would be going to her uncle's, but no one is putting a time on it and this was months ago. It sucks I'm always stuck looking like the bad guy telling her what she needs to hear, but you're right. For my family I have to take it in my hands. Your agreement was to have them temporarily while they arranged their assistance and new home. And food stamps. They broke the agreement. Talk to a lawyer. Legal aid is usually least expensive, to make sure you can just say go, not have to formally evict them. Then set a deadline for them to leave. Remind Mael that she needs to get assistance applications done. And make sure she can get to where she needs to get IDs, see social workers in person, etc. They will cry how you are cruel to kick them out, but you cannot afford to support an entire extra family, and if your landlord finds out you could be evicted. So take action now. Thank you so much for the advice. I will do just that. Made me feel a lot better. I would get the cheapest 1-bedroom with your children when your lease is up and move. Do not renew the lease. My dad gets mad at a pregnant lady and her setup/takedown crew. My wife, 27F, and I, 27M, hired a crew for our wedding to set up and take down decorations at our venue. Just to save everyone some stress before the wedding day. The venue had a small little 1-vehicle alley to back into for loading and unloading vehicles close to an easy accessible door. Now, the crew had their vehicle backed into that alley to load up all their decorations and all their stuff. My father was getting very impatient with them blocking the alley because he wanted to load up his truck with his stuff and take off because he was so tired from the wedding and was impatiently asking her and her crew how long they were going to take because they are blocking the door. The lady in charge of the crew was very clearly pregnant and working her hardest to get everything out in a fast manner. My wife and I ended up stepping in and telling my dad to calm down and let them do their job, which made him give everyone attitude for the rest of the day until the crew was done and gone and he loaded his stuff and left. To apologize to the lady and her crew for the way he acted to them, we offered them to take as much of the leftover cupcakes from the wedding that they wanted, and even after all that they all politely refused and seemed to appreciate us stepping in so they could continue their job. Not the most insane EP story, but I sure chewed him out afterwards for acting like a 5-year-old who missed his nap. Did you tip actual money instead of just cupcakes? But no, he sounds entitled as hell. I believe we left a tip when we prepaid for their services. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.